Today we're talking about loving and compassionate communication. I chose this topic because Walt and I have been doing some work on improving our communication. And we've been listening to a program that was created in the 80s and continued on into the 90s by Dr. Ellen Friedman. And I just found out this week when I dug into her biography that she'd passed away 3 years ago. It's kind of strange. She passed away 3 years ago on Wednesday, and we were listening to her tape on that day. It was nice to know that, I'm sure she would appreciate knowing that even though she's transitioned, her work carries on and has some meaning for people. I'd like to share some ideas with you because the work that she has shared is so practical and so powerful. None of what I'll say is new news. That doesn't mean that it's easy. And although a lot of it is common sense, I think we can all agree that sometimes common sense isn't all that common. And so my usual disclaimer stands with you, and that is, what I share with you today is stuff that I need to learn. And I offer it as a buffet of ideas. If something registers and resonates with you, please take it and enjoy and learn. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. In Unity, we believe that each of us is divine already. And so we don't force you to believe anything. We simply offer practical ideas for spreading love in our world. And I believe our work in this human experience is to know our oneness with each other, to connect with the divinity that is already in ourselves and in others, and to connect with God by whatever name you have for God. We are to show up as living examples of unconditional love. We are to live as expressions of God, which is living as love. And our belief, our goal, is to express our divinity every day, in every moment, through what we think, what we say, and what we do. How we relate and communicate, whether it's to others, to ourselves, or to God, is an indicator of how we're doing in this work of filling the world with love. Communication requires listening, speaking, and acting. So I hope you'll find some of these ideas that I share with you helpful in supporting loving communication in your relationships. Today's focus will be largely on how well we listen. We could do entire lifetimes on any one of it, listening, speaking, or acting. But today we'll focus mainly on listening, and I will touch a little bit on some speech. Now, you may have heard the saying, and I swear it was written for me, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Does anyone other than me have a need to always be right? Always want to fix it when someone tells us about a problem that they may be having? Or worse, when that person shares a problem with us, we want to show how much we understand, and so we tell them our problems too? Yeah, better. We all do it. So, okay, that means that these words today are for all of us. Why is listening important? Each one of us has a need to be heard. Each one of us has a need to matter. And each one of us has a need to feel respected. And one of the most powerful ways that we can let someone know that they matter is to mentally step into their shoes and understand where they're coming from. Let them feel their feelings and empathize with what they're going through, whether it be a good experience or a bad one. To give myself a framework for listening in love, I came up with an acronym. We have so many acronyms, but I use the letters L, O, V, and E. And it may sound corny, but I find these little mnemonics to work for me. I find them really helpful tricks. In fact, it's the only way I remember the order of the planets, my very educated mother, whatever. My mother's in the back and she's very educated. Mom. Anyway, so I ask your acceptance of just rolling with this idea of the overplayed acronym. The letters LOVE, L-O-V-E, stand for listen openly, validate, and empathize. Listen openly, validate, and empathize. Said a different way, shut up, stop thinking, stop doing, and say, ooh. That's listening. So let's go to our first letter, listen. The fact that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth is a good reminder that loving communication requires more listening than speaking. In order to truly listen, we need to be still, suspend judgment, and put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And we have all had this experience of trying to tell someone a story, and they interrupt us before we've had a chance to get to our punchline. How did that feel when it happened? It probably led to a feeling that you weren't valued, that you didn't have a voice, and it doesn't feel good. How about when we try speaking to someone and they're completely distracted? They're watching the TV, they're reading the newspaper, they're texting, they're on their computer playing a game. That doesn't feel good either. The golden rule works for this as well. Do unto others as we would have them do unto us. If we don't like it, we would do well not to model it. When someone is telling us something, the best way to demonstrate our love for them is to give them our full attention, to suspend judgment, zip our lips, and listen. Giving a person our full attention is in itself a skill. And I want to talk just for a moment about body language and how important that is in letting a person know that we are truly paying attention to them. When we listen, we demonstrate that we are fully engaged by being attentive when we make eye contact, when we don't sneak a glance at our watch. We've all done it. Like when we cross our arms, when we roll our eyes, when we move away from each other, when we find little things to distract ourselves. Let's be attentive when we listen. Another thing we need to do when we're listening is a term that they call interested silence or active silence. And that is a space that we give the person who is speaking a chance to think, reflect, and then go on at their own pace, often allowing them time to create a deeper insight that they can share with you. But there's a term called listening for the pause. Again, guilty. And that's when we aren't really listening at all to what that person is saying. What we're thinking about is what we're going to say to them the second that they stop and take a breath so that we can get our word in. Because we have such brilliant insight that we have to share. That's not listening. But it isn't easy to break these habits. As Yoda said, you must unlearn what you have learned. All of us have years of listening habits that are ingrained in us. And it takes true commitment and a willingness to do something different to transform how we listen. It requires silence, mental stillness, and patience. So next time someone comes to you and you need to listen, consider, stop speaking, stop thinking, and listen. Next, be open. As if the first one wasn't hard, try this. You gotta listen with the goal to understand what the other person is feeling. And that means suspending judgment. Oi. You know, each of us is a different expression of divinity. We each have different backgrounds, we each have different personalities, and we each have different strengths. And that means that I will be completely indifferent to the point of being oblivious to things that may really matter a great deal to you. There are things that I may be very upset about that you, when you hear the story, just kind of want to say, well, get over it, what's the big deal? Does anyone here relate to that? We value different things because we're different people. And effective communication requires that we suspend judgment and see things from the other person's point of view, whether we agree with that point of view or not. Listening openly forces us to be reminded that the other person has as much right to their point of view as we have to ours. That is what respect for others looks like. That is what seeing the worth in everyone, seeing the God in every face, looks like. Each of us is invested in our own point of view, and it's difficult. It is difficult to let other people be right too, especially when we know that we're right and that ours is the only way, and that they're really stupid for thinking the way they do. The thing we need to remember is that we don't need to change a person's mind. Unless they ask for it, unless they say, tell me what you think, we don't actually need to change their mind. All we need to do is strive to understand. And as Pixie said last week in her talk, our goal must be for collaboration, not for control. As always, for stuff that's not easy, there is practical wisdom available to us in the words of Jesus. When we're listening to someone speak and we think we have a better way, or we think that they're wrong because they don't share our point of view, we're acting as accuser and judge. And what Jesus said in Matthew is, come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're on your way to court, or you will be thrown in prison. Quote, unquote. Now, when I first read this, I thought that Jesus meant that we should come to terms quickly with the other person, the other physical person that we're speaking to, if they are disagreeing with you or if they're attacking you. But as I reflected on it more, I think what Jesus was talking about is that we should come to terms quickly with the accuser within us, the accusing part of ourselves, as we are on the way to making a judgment. If we catch ourselves quickly before we make a judgment, we free ourselves from that prison that he spoke about, the prison of narrow-mindedness, of not seeing the divinity of the other person, of alienating our fellow man. Our challenge is to come to terms with or catch our judgment before it takes hold in our thinking, and then focus on understanding what the other person is experiencing. And when we move from this, we move from an enemy consciousness, a fear consciousness, to a consciousness of love, of partnership, and of acceptance. today's Father's Day, as we all know. And it's a good day then for parents and parent figures everywhere, male and female, to reflect on how well we are listening openly. If we want to know what's going on in our children's lives, we need to cultivate the skill of listening with no judgment. We may be absolutely shocked at what we're hearing, but if we want our kids, and the same thing is true for our friends or our spouses or our employees, anyone, if we want to know what is going on in their lives, then we need to accept what they're saying and be completely open and non-judgmental about it. Who knows? We might even find that our opinion shifts as we listen to them speak. A technique that helps to listen openly and build understanding is called reflective listening. I just want to go over, see if I can find it in here. There's a book called Parent Effectiveness Training. Lori will have heard of it. Basically, what this book teaches is for parents, teaching how to not react when kids say stuff, but instead to respond with wisdom. What this person did. Kid comes home from school. I had a problem with my teacher today. The parent says, I had a problem. The kid goes on. Yeah, I hate Mr. Da-da-da. He's very hard to work with. He prefers this child, doesn't like this child. And the parent goes, oh, that must be really difficult. Kid goes on, yeah, it's awful, And then he goes and does this and then does that. And, oh, well, maybe he's not that bad. What happens is the child resolves the issue, and all the parent did was poke. All they did was reflect. All they did was say, I'm listening, keep going. As opposed to, kid comes home from school, I had a problem with Mr. So-and-so today. Oh man, again? What's going on? What did you do? As soon as you get to the point where the child is not allowed to be who they are, and the assumption is made that they have done something wrong, you've lost them. The problem for us as adults, or the challenge for us as adults, is we're all still that same child. We need to be okay with just hearing what somebody says and going, that's interesting. Tell me more. I know that's something I have to work on. Not easy. Not easy. Especially because I'm always right. So, when we've listened openly, then we can live out the next 2 letters in our listening guide. Validate and empathize. Validating what a person is feeling, again, does not mean that you agree with it. It simply lets them know that we hear their point of view and we respect their right to that point of view. We may be miles apart in whether we agree with each other. Our philosophies may be completely different. But that doesn't really matter. If you can say, I can see how you might feel that way, I'm glad that works for you, it sends a message that you respect the other person's point of view. The hard part, and the part I have yet to master, is that my words are normally, I can see how you feel that way, but... And then I want to go into a lecture to try and change their perspective, or to fix the problem, or to tell them why they shouldn't feel that way. Not cool. It's not listening, it's not love. When someone expresses a feeling or an emotion to you, Dr. Kreidman suggests that we ask ourselves, am I being asked for help or advice? Somebody says something, am I being asked for help and advice? If the answer is no, shut up. That's her words. I kind of like it because it's very concise and easy to remember. Unless we're being asked for help, don't give it. This is especially true for people who are in pain. Instead of offering advice, we need to provide the person in pain a space so that they can express their feelings. Love looks like letting them know that they are loved no matter how they're feeling, no matter how they're showing up, and all we need to do is be there for them. So whether it's the end of a relationship, a health issue, a lost job, or some other challenge, all we need to do is allow them the space to express what they're feeling. Someone who's enduring a health issue may not want to hear about some revolutionary new treatment that they should try. Someone who's just lost a job probably doesn't want to be second-guessed about what they could have done differently so they didn't get fired. Someone who survived a car crash may indeed be lucky that they are alive and that they escaped with only minor injuries. But the shock and trauma that they may be feeling is still real and still needs to be expressed. People in pain do not need to be second-guessed. They don't need to be told that they should consider themselves lucky. They don't need to be told that it's God's plan. Although we may be desperate to help and comfort people who are in pain, these words end up alienating. Our job is simply to show up and make a place for them to come and cry. They need our arms, not our mouth. This is important, especially for us Unity folk. We know, and we believe so strongly that all things work for the good, that everything is in divine order. But sometimes it's not the right time to remind somebody. We're all human. We feel pain. And you don't want to go to someone and say that they should not feel this way because everything is in divine order. Even Jesus wept when he saw Mary and Lazarus' friends crying after Lazarus died. He cried. Later, if your friend comes to you and asks for help to make sense of their experience, then that's the time that you guys can start to share. Until then, just be there. Okay. Thankfully, most of the interactions that require our empathy aren't that painful. The everyday stuff is no less important, though, in how we practice it. Whatever someone is going through, we need to love them right where they are, trusting that they will either figure it out or ask for advice. If we go into lecturing, if we start shoulding on them, how likely are they to come to us the next time something happens? Instead, respond with words like what I mentioned to you about that parent. Wow, tell me more. Oh, that must have been scary. And then what happened? You must be feeling awful. These are ways that encourage open communication through validation and empathy. They also create that feeling of belonging that we all need. That I'm okay to be feeling this. As Jim Morrison said, and I quote, "A friend is someone who gives you total freedom to be yourself." End quote. remember, they need your arms, not your intellect. That's for me. And while we're talking about being there for other people's experiences, have you ever had the experience of telling something to someone and then have them take over the conversation with their own experience? You know, it sounds like, wow, that's terrible. Well, if you think that was bad, you should have heard what happened when, ... What just happened in that interaction? The person speaking got shut right down and invalidated. They were told they don't matter. Now, I know that it's true that every day there is someone who is in more pain than I am, and there is someone who is in less pain than I am. And I guess that might help with perspective down the road. But that doesn't make my pain right now any less legitimate. There's a difference between empathy because you've gone through a similar experience, and you can say, I know how you might be feeling, tell me more, I'm here for you. And one-upmanship. I know how you might be feeling about losing your job, but let me tell you about my experience when I lost mine. Unless you're asked for advice, again, shut up and listen. It also works for painful experiences, for great experiences, you know. You had a great vacation? Oh, that's great. Awesome. When we went on vacation, and off they go. Or there was a conversation, let's see if I can remember. It's a couple talking, and one person is doing all the speaking. And then he says, oh, enough about me, enough about me. Tell me, what do you think of me? To fill the world with love, we need to step out of ourselves and connect with the other person where they are. Listening is not about us. It's about being there for the other person. So, to summarize my suggestions for living in love, listen openly, validate, and empathize. And now, very briefly, I'm going to examine a few thoughts on how we speak to each other. As much as listening is not about us, how we speak to another person is all about us. Have you ever noticed how nice we can be to strangers and how unkind or short we can be to the people we care the most about? Something wrong with that. There's a saying, you know, familiarity breeds contempt. We need to guard against that. If we believe that each of us is an expression of the divine, then we need to speak to the other person, another person, or, for that matter, to ourselves, as if we are speaking to God. The admonition to not take the Lord's name in vain can be interpreted at a deeper level when we remind ourselves that we're all expressions of God. When we beat ourselves up with negative self-talk, when we are tempted to fix other people because they're wrong, when we are gossiping, naming, blaming, shaming, we're taking the Lord's name in vain. And Jesus made this point really clearly when he said in Matthew, and I quote, "And the king will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me.'" I think that's my mom's favorite verse. On Sundays, we often sing the song, "See God in Every Face." And loving communication involves speaking our truth in a way that is as respectful as if you were speaking to God. I guess this matters to me. So here are just a couple of ideas on improving how we speak to each other. First, use statements that begin with I rather than you. No one can argue with how you're feeling. Our feelings are ours. So if we're upset, we state that we're upset from our own point of view. I am upset because you came home late last night and you didn't call. Rather than, you're irresponsible because you didn't call. As an example. Do you see how the one approach is more likely to receive a defensive response than the other? Always try to use I. Speak from where you are. Second, avoid absolutes. Always and never. Again, the response is more likely to be defensive in the face of an accusation. You never do this. That's just going to beg for an argument. Oh yes, I do. Thirdly, when we express our needs and make requests for change, we need to do it respectfully. If the person declines after we've made a request respectfully, if they decline to honor the request, hard, we may not like it. But love means respecting the other person's right to choose. And then it is up to us to choose how to respond to that. James, the book of James, summarizes this entire talk on loving communication in one sentence. And he writes in James, and I quote, "My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And I couldn't resist this quote from Mother Teresa. "Spread love everywhere you go. Let no one ever come to you without leaving happier." Aren't those pretty words? There's a concept that they use with children, the concept of love cups. The idea, basically, is to monitor yourself mentally in every interaction that you have. Pretend this is a person's love cup. And in every interaction, you either add to their love and fill their cup, or you're draining it. So I invite you this week to think about love cups with your interactions. Am I adding or am I taking away? I'll put, when Delaney's singing, I'll pass out cups so that you all have one to remember. You know. Now, in the musical version of Goodbye, Mr. Chips, the school anthem is the song that you may have heard when you came in today. It was playing for those people who were here early. I was playing it just in the background so you get familiar with the music. I sang it as a child, and it's become sort of an anthem for our family in a way. And in a few minutes, I'd like us all to stand up and sing it. But before I do that, before we sing, I want to bring together the theme of Father's Day, mentorship, and this theme of filling the world with love. In the movie Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Mr. Chipping, as he is called, is a man who is a school teacher, and in the movie he starts out as a brand new school teacher, completely out of school, young, and you watch him as he grows and ages, and eventually he becomes the principal at the school, and then he ends up having to retire because he's getting so old, but he can't be away from his beloved school, so he stays very close to it and has a house right beside the school. He's very inspirational to these boys. And at the end of the movie, Mr. Chips overhears colleagues who express sadness that Chips had never had children. And he says, I heard you say that it was a pity that I never had children. But you're wrong. I have. Thousands of them. All boys. You don't need to be a dad to serve as a guide and inspiration for others. You just need to love.